If you are in a relationship, generally, I think the assumption is you want it to be long term. That's the goal, right? We're meant to find a mate. That's just nature. But what if you think that's the one that, whether you're married or not, you're long term? And I have friends who I have one friend who's been engaged for 5 years. That's a long engagement. I just said at some point you got to jump off the cliff. You know what I mean? But what if it goes sour? What if it falls apart? I think we all wonder about that with that over our heads when we're into a relationship. Let's get into it with Dr. John Braccio. We have a relationship with him at Regional Psychological Services, our What's Up Doc segment for a Tuesday. Hey, Doc Braccio, what's up, Doc?
Well, good morning, Mike. And, I think the goal or dream of most persons is to really have a loving, long-term relationship with a partner. And even if not in a marriage, the goal is the same because most human beings do not like being alone and tired of ongoing, many generally shallow relationships. And the pain can be very difficult emotionally. When one believes they're in a relationship that may potentially be lifelong and it suddenly explodes into an unexpected breakup, well, the person then is in great emotional distress, even if they knew the relationship was not going well when it unexpectedly breaks up. And even if this is something that occurs in a short-term intense relationship, that does not minimize the pain emotionally the person suffers who experiences it. And the following are some things to do if this occurs in your life. Okay, recognize that as painful as it is for you emotionally, you're going to be able to move on and most likely eventually find a successful long-term relaction.
Boy, that's a tough sell right there. Oh, well, it'll be all right. You'll move on.
Well, it's one of those philosophical things you're kind of telling the person, but you're right. It's a very, very difficult time. But you try to determine what actually then destroyed the relationship, okay, as you're in this grieving process. And when persons are blindsided and the relationship ends, there often were signs that were not noticed and sometimes did not want to be believed. That's another thing that a lot of times it seems surprising to many people, but the person that the relationship blows up on, that that there were problems and there were issues. They just didn't want to see it. So you try to learn from what happened to make sure it doesn't happen again. That sounds very simple, but Mike, it requires a lot of personal analysis, a lot of soul searching, and then recognize that most relationships that break up, whether long or short term, are the result of problems on both sides. And without developing guilt and great remorse, which really aren't going to get you anywhere, it's important to see if you had problems with possessiveness, criticalness, selfishness, envy, or what Shakespeare called the green-eyed monster of jealousy. And then you can seek out friends and family who care, who will be supportive with you during this period of difficulty. You don't want to overwhelm them with your feelings, but rather seek their support and love in difficult emotional times. And accept there will be a painful emotional period or grieving for what has been lost and you believe could have developed. That really has to be done. And then recognize the ending of the relationship may be very helpful to you psychologically if the two of you were a bad fit and only future problems would have occurred if you stayed together. Now, if you try this and you really still find it's impossible to sort out what's occurred, then really you can seek out an experienced therapist with short-term and long-term failing relationships so that person can be helpful to prepare you psychologically to be more effective in future relationships. But overall, when you get a relationship, even if it doesn't have to be a long-term but intense relationship, and all of a sudden it blows up, it is painful, Mike. It could be devastating to the person and hard for them to really get over. So when it occurs, a person has to really take a time out, realize there's going to be grieving, it's going to be painful. Even if everyone else understands it and may feel it's the best thing for you, you're not going to see that. You're going to be looking at what could have happened, and even if there were issues.
the coulda, shoulda, wouldas.
The coulda, shoulda, mighta, oughta, and as you know, you can't shoulda, woulda, mighta, oughta on any of that now.
No,
Past tense is over.
It's a weird sort of conundrum that as young teens, when we start to discover each other, right? Then you fall hard, boy. Everybody's got stories of that first love. Sometimes it sticks, sometimes. Yeah. And your high school sweetheart is your wife and lover and husband, and you're there together forever. But generally not. Isn't it a weird conundrum that in our most vulnerable emotional time, developmental time, that's when we fall hard? And you mentioned seek out loved ones, family, friends, and all that. I remember her name was Joni, and I'm like 16. And I thought, sure, this was it, man. I mean, it was it. And I was ready to get married at 16 years old, and then she dumped me, and it fell apart. Anyway, I every get-together, every party, every game, everything, I would talk to my friend Randy about it. And at one point, Randy's such a good friend. He's still a good friend. He comes to me and he goes, you're really a drag to be around. He said, get over it. We got a whole life ahead of us. What are you talking about? And we laugh about it today, but that's a tough thing. What would you say for parents to guide teens through brokenheartedness? That's that first one rough, man. Rip that Band-Aid off. Ouch.
I think parents, successful parents for this, are helpful. They talk to the person. They indicate that if the person wanted to break it off, that really it's part of life, and there were issues, there were things that weren't there, and the importance of two people being in full agreement. I mean, you can't have a duo if both parts don't want to be a part of it. I mean, these are things that are easier said than done to the person, but just try to be supportive, sometimes just hugging them or talking to them or listening to them, because you can just say, that if it's a guy, Jezebel wasn't good for you, or Mary or whatever, it just wasn't going to work. And, of course, this can happen not just with young people. It can happen at any age, these type of short-term, intense relationships that one really thinks is going somewhere. But back on the young person, you just be supportive. You try to let the person know that there is a blue sky out there in spite of the storm, and just wait for the person to overcome it. And it doesn't matter what age the person is. There are few persons that never get over it. Persons eventually can see there were problems in it, and other person didn't see it right. And often they have to look and realize they may have been the problem, because if you have a lot of jealousy and you have a lot of envy, you have a lot of criticalness, you have a lot of just unpleasantness and controlling, these type things, you may have to look in the mirror and say, I'm really the reason this relationship broke up, and I'm going to have to make some changes and not make the same mistakes, particularly if it's multiple times. If it's not just one time, if it's two times. If you're in various relationships that don't work, you have to begin to think that you're a major component
Maybe
of
it's
the
me.
problem. Well, and that's really hard, because a lot of people, that when they love, they believe that the other person is accepting and hearing and receiving the feelings that you're giving the same way. But if you're trying to control and overwhelm the person, and are negative, you can be negative the way of being positive. Well, you're going to go out and do that, or you'd rather be with Mary than with me, or whatever. Those can be controlling, and people really don't like that. I mean, they have to maybe develop boundaries in a good way, in a good relationship. Each does, but when you get the controlling, call it what you will, negativity, it can really squash and really ruin a relationship. And then there are also others that just enjoy the butterflies that will go from one relationship and kind of cause havoc and then go to another one. And some people are too blind not to see that. So if relationships, which we want, and we hopefully can maintain one for most of a lifetime, or not a full lifetime, but there are these things that crater in life, relationships, and we have to be aware of that. But if we're willing to have one, we really want one, we're going to have to take some risks. And sometimes when we take those risks, it can lead to hurt and some real difficult emotional periods, Mike. But to me, it's worth the effort. Just try to work at it and try to find the right person. That's what we do.
Well, we're meant to be. We're not meant to be lone wolves out there, so
That is true.
that. Dr. John Braccio, Regional Psychological Services. Find him at drjohnb.com. It's our What's Up Doc segment every week on Tuesdays, Doctor. We will talk to you again next week, my friend.
Nice talking to you, my friend. You have a good day and a good week. Bye-bye.
All right. See you, buddy. 1320 WILS. Mike Austin with your morning wake up. We'll be right back.